And after leading a huge multi-country yoga celebration at the UN headquarters in New York, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is now in Washington, D.C. It's a packed schedule for him on Thursday. He's scheduled to hold bilateral talks with U.S. President Joe Biden, address a joint session of the U.S. Congress and attend a state dinner at the White House. The U.S. capital city has rolled out the red carpet for Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. U.S. President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden welcomed the Indian Prime Minister at the White House earlier today. Biden is aiming to tighten his relations with the leader of a nation seen as an important force in Asia for decades to come. The pomp-filled state visit marks their 10th meeting since Biden came into the office. The Bidens also hosted a private dinner for Prime Minister Modi at the White House. Now, Washington wants New Delhi to be a strategic counterweight to China and sees India as a critical partner. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is seeking to raise the influence that India has on the world stage. On Thursday, Prime Minister Modi will be welcomed with full military honors at the White House. He will then hold the crucial bilateral talks with U.S. President Joe Biden, after which the two leaders are expected to address a press conference and also take questions. In the evening, the Prime Minister is scheduled to address the joint session of the U.S. Congress. He is the first Indian Prime Minister to do this twice. The Prime Minister will conclude his day with a state dinner at the White House hosted by the Bidens. Now let's take you through the likely outcomes of this state visit. Quoting sources, news agency Reuters stated that the US is set to ease visa for skilled Indian workers, as Prime Minister Modi visits the State Department could announce that some Indians and other foreign workers on H-1B visas will be able to renew those visas in the US without having to travel abroad, that is. Now, the Indians are by far the most active users of the US H-1B program. They made up 73% of the nearly 442,000 H-1B workers in fiscal year 2022. On the agenda of the state visit is also expanding bilateral cooperation in the defense industry and high-tech sectors. India is expecting to get access to critical American technologies that Washington rarely shares with non-allies. A deal for General Electric to produce engines for fighter jets on the Indian soil is also on the cards. Meanwhile, another expected announcement is India's purchase of 31 armed MQ-9B Sea Guardian drones made by the General Atomics, worth $3 billion. Now, the world's two largest democracies are also likely to make announcements on climate. It's an area where there have been various opinions on the responsibilities of developed versus the developing countries. Meanwhile, on June 23rd, the Indian Prime Minister will be hosted by the U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris and U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Washington and New Delhi have been moving closer for over 2 decades now. The successive U.S. presidents have displayed bipartisan support for stronger ties with the emerging Asian economy and regional power. And U.S. President Joe Biden has built on that very legacy and only expanded the cooperation forward. For more on this, our correspondent Molly Gambhir has sent us this report from the White House. Take a look.
A jam-packed schedule lying ahead for the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi here in Washington, D.C., where he has been received by U.S. President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden. A private dinner ahead of that state dinner. First Lady Jill Biden was earlier also seen previewing the menu. And we also saw members of Studio Dhoom, which is a local dance studio here, performing a tribute to the regions of India. So that's been quite a colorful start to the visit here of the Indian Prime Minister. A series of engagements lying ahead, coming with a lot of expectations. This state visit, defense cooperation and tech ties being the two key focus areas. But apart from that, we will see the Indian Prime Minister engaging in a lot of those discussions with the business delegates. He will also be addressing the Indian diaspora and a joint address to the U.S. Congress. So the next few hours especially will be crucial in terms of the discussions that happen between the two leaders. And the key deliverables are not just the bullet points on paper that have been mentioned, but the headlines that have already been making their way when it comes to ISET, when it comes to the GE deal, when it comes to deepening defense cooperation. Those will continue to dominate the discussions and the expectations here of the Indian Prime Minister's state visit, and an opportunity for the two countries to forge deeper ties across various levels, but defense cooperation and tech ties being the key focus areas. Molly Gambhir, outside the White House, Washington, D.C., reporting for WION World this month.